I am very, very excited to introduce Derek Featherstone. He is a former Ironman triathlete and a current Star Wars fanboy. I know this, I saw the Ottawa meetup. He's also been a web professional since 1999, an internationally known speaker, teacher, and authority on accessibility and web design. He leads the team at Simply Accessible, based in Ottawa, Canada. He always puts the user first and strives to make the web a better place by designing experiences that are easy to use for everyone, including people with disabilities. Derek's ideal accessible experience is to combine engaging and rich content with brilliant design and technical development excellence. Please give a warm Chicago welcome to Derek Featherstone.
I am sweating a lot right now after that introduction. I feel a little bit of pressure, but I think we'll sort it out. This is a field guide to web accessibility, and the idea behind this is that this is a collection of things that we learned by actually working with people with different disabilities on real things, and not just things that we learned out of books or reading things that people said, these are the guidelines and this is how it should be. These were things that we learned doing actual testing with real people, as opposed to fake people. Because when you test with fake people, as well. So we're talking about sitting there. And one of the things that we do at Simply Accessible, and we kind of drew a line in the sand about 2.5 years ago. We said we don't really engage in projects where there's no actual usability testing with people that actually have disabilities. And we drew that line basically because to us, that's kind of the ultimate test of whether or not something works. For us, the checklist, WCAG guidelines, the things that we say we need to do from an accessibility perspective, that needs to be the starting point, not the end point. The true end point is really, yes, it meets all these technical requirements, but can it really be used by somebody that has different types of disabilities? Because if they can't, what was the point in the first place, right? So this is a collection of stories and things that kind of share some of those concepts and situations with you. I'm really interested in this because this is, lots of people here. And I'm really interested in knowing how many people are like web geeks and not web geeks. Some people come to these kind of meetups and they're just interested in what we're talking about. So hands up and say aye if you're a developer, like a web developer. Right?
Aye.
There wasn't enough ayes there. Happy you didn't say that. So let's try that again. Hands up and say aye if you're a developer.
Aye.
All right, so that was better. Hands up and say aye if you are a designer.
Aye.
You guys are way less enthusiastic. And then anybody like hands up and say aye if you're like a project manager or a product owner type thing.
Aye.
Good chunk of numbers there. That's good. That's excellent. And then anybody hands up and say aye if you're like a QA type person. Aye. Okay, so there's a couple. That's good. It's good to see you in the corner. Excellent. I don't know why you're in the corner, but that's okay. And then the rest of you, how many people are like a hybrid where you do like a whole lot of everything? So hands up and aye for that. Aye. It's probably most of the rest of you. Did I not cover anybody? Like, is there somebody that I want everybody to feel represented here? This is very inclusive. So UX, I consider that to be kind of part of design, but great, yes. So UX, anybody else like a hardcore UXer? Hands up and say aye. 3. How come you guys aren't saying aye? Say aye. Yeah, excellent. So there's about 4 people that are like.
We're already in like 3 times already.
Yeah, fair enough. Anybody just here like doesn't know anything about the web at all and just kind of came because they saw like, oh, networking, that could be fun. Okay, well that's fine too. That's true. Well,
That's even better.
it's good to kind of hear what kind of representation we have. I'm really interested in dynamics and where everybody fits, but hopefully there's things in here that are useful for everybody. I'd like to start off with this. This is a tap from a hotel in London that I stayed at. London in the UK, not London, Ontario, which is, so I'm from Ottawa, Canada. We have our own London. It's not quite the same, but this is a tap from that hotel where I had a hot water tap on the left and I had a hot water tap on the right. And I don't know what to do. So I'm out. I decided I'm not showering that day. It's not gonna happen. This doesn't work for me. These two hot water taps are confusing until I see this sign that tells me that the left tap operates the shower and the right tap operates the bath. So now I know if I'm going to burn my head or my feet at least. The problem with this interface is that the tap is exactly where you expect it to be, but the instructions on how to operate it are about 6 feet away on the side wall. And you can all instinctively look at this and say, well, that just doesn't make sense. Those instructions need to kind of be somewhere in the line of sight when you're looking at the tap. Those instructions should be kind of in the vicinity. And from a design perspective, we call that proximity. We want to take these closely related items and we want to group them together. So we're going to do a little experiment here, very straightforward. I'd like you to all take your, provided that you can see the screen, I'd love for you to take your left hand or your right hand, either one. If you do both, it's not going to work. So take your left hand or your right hand, hold it up, and make a fist like you're holding onto a straw. What you're going to do is you're going to look through the straw. You don't actually have a straw, but pretend you do. You're going to look through the straw at the screen, and what you're going to need to do is two things. One is orient yourself to the interface, and two is go through the process of filling out the form. So I just told you what's on the interface. It's a form that you need to fill out. Does that make sense? Now when you hold the straw, we're going to do a test run. Hold up your straw. You need to actually put it right up against your eye, and then you need to close the other eye, okay, or cover it with your hand. So what we're doing here is we're limiting how much you can see. Now some of you are like holding onto a garden hose right now. You need to make it like a straw, like a tiny little cocktail straw. So that's what you're going to do. I'm about to reveal the interface. Are you ready for this? Straws up, and away you go. And while you do that,
Sorry,
I'm going to take a photo.
my bad eye. It's gonna be trouble.
Some of you are still filling in the form. Some of you are done. Some of you are like, I'm out. We can't do this. So what we have on this form is we have 4 clusters of information, and the clusters are 2 questions on the left-hand side, and then 2 sets of answers way over on the right-hand side, and then 2 more questions on the left-hand side, and then 2 more sets of answers on the far right-hand side, and then we have our quit button, our previous button, and our next button. This is a very straightforward form, and yet this was coded perfectly, and it worked very well for somebody that was using a screen reader. And it was, the developers that built it said to me, like, but this is coded perfectly, this is accessible. And then we went and actually tested it with people that had low vision, that weren't using screen readers. It failed miserably. And those of you that were looking through the straw might actually understand a little bit about why. What motion did you have to go through to fill in that form? Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Because of the way that this form is designed, where we have these questions on the left and the answers way over on the right, what ends up happening is we're creating a situation like this. When somebody has low vision, they have a limited view of the screen. So this is roughly 250% magnification. Somebody that needs 200% magnification is going to see roughly 1/4 of the screen at any given time. If they see, if they need 300% magnification, they will see 1/9 of the screen at any given time. 400% would be 1/16 of the screen. that they will be looking at. And so it's very easy to lose that context. If you take a look here, when we're magnified and we're zoomed in and you're looking at those questions, you really just see the questions. And when you scrolled over to the far right to get to those answers, those questions that you just saw are now kind of like out of sight, out of mind. The same thing as the tap and the instructions for the tap being 6 feet away from each other. It's exactly the same thing. So what we need to do in interface design is take those closely related items and group them together. There's really good reasons. We create visual relationships when we do that. We can create programmatic, programmatic relationships all day long in code for screen reader users and Dragon Naturally Speaking users. But the visual relationships are quite important for people with low vision. The proximity of things becomes even more important to them, almost more important than the programmatic stuff. So we're at this point here where we're started on the left and we see these questions, and then we've gone over to the right to answer that first question. We go back over to the left to hit the next question. Right for the answer, left for the question, right for the answer, left for the question, right for the answer. What's your next move? Left for the question. That is not a question, but it's quit. It's a call to action. That is kind of our least desirable call to action. And yet we led them right there by that pattern of use that we created. We also have things, and this is not unique to people with low vision, but there's a certain muscle memory that you created. You probably felt it. You knew exactly how far to scroll over every time when you were looking through the straw. Next place where those answers were when we get our second least favorite call to action, the previous question. Right? There's a whole lot of things wrapped up into this. We've created a pattern of use. We have created the wrong chunks of information. And if you take a look at these three buttons, the quit, the previous, and the next, from a design perspective, we say that they have essentially the same visual weight. They're all the same shape. They're all roughly the same size. They have the same color, all the same other characteristics. The only thing that's different about them is the text and the characters that are on them. So when we take a look at all three of these different factors, this design actually ends up kind of failing miserably for someone with low vision. We have these kind of the wrong chunks, right? Question and question, answer and answer. Question, question, answer, answer. That's like all kinds of wrong. So what we want to do is we want to take this and fix all three of those things at once and make this something that works a little bit better for someone with low vision. And we're not really just saying every form should be designed like this, but actually we are. Every form should be designed like this. We want to create things that work well, that have the right groupings, that have a really straightforward flow if we can, and that have really obvious calls to action. So we want to take this interface and maybe turn it, and this is not the only design, but this is one that works reasonably well. That same interface, and we design it so that it's in a vertical stack. So instead of having multiple columns, we actually make things flow in a vertical stack such that we create the right groupings and we go directly down to the call to action. So now, if you bring your straws up and fill out this form, compare the experience. So go ahead, straws up, and fill out this form. You should immediately recognize the difference. You probably will never completely eliminate left to right scrolling, and that's not necessarily the goal. But the idea is, like if this second question was really long, you might have to scroll some. You won't necessarily eliminate that. We were looking at magnification that was at like 250%. Somebody might be looking at it at 500%. Right? But what we do by creating this vertical stack is we minimize the effort that's required to fill out that form by somebody that has low vision. We've got the right groupings. Instead of question, question, answer, answer, we've got question and answer, question and answer, question and answer, question and answer. You also see what we've done with the calls to action. Right? They're now distinct. They're not all exactly the same shape. For someone with low vision, those shapes might all look like the same blob. right? Whereas here, we've made it like, this is a really definite, this is our primary call to action that we want people to take, and then the other ones they look different and they have different characteristics in the interface. So all of that should make sense to you, and when we look at this even magnified and we zoom in to that roughly 250%, you can see what happens, that pattern of use is no longer left, right, it's straight down. The thing that I love about this is that design also works really well for a mobile device, right? Multi-column layouts on a mobile device for somebody that can see the screen are a total pain. When you have your form label to the left and you have the field on the right-hand side, and I don't know about you, but I hate this when I tap into a form field and suddenly the label is gone, right? It's off the screen. I can't see it. When I move to the next field, if I hit the next, either if I tap the field directly, or if I use the, you usually have a next field thing to say go to the next field, those don't zoom back out to let you see what the field is. Right? This single vertical stack is actually really good for people that are on a mobile device as well. So I love this kind of idea of creating these little things that we can do, and I want you to use that straw test. We use that straw test at Simply Accessible to test wireframes, to test mockups, to test live designs, and that's all to try and make things better before we ever test them with real people that have low vision. All we're doing is simulating some of the effects of having low vision by limiting that field of view. Make sense? Like, use it. Every design you ever create, try it and see the impact that it has. And I'm not saying that you're going to make radical changes to your design, but you will find things that seem out of place. Go through flows, go through tasks like go and purchase Cubs Pirates tickets for tomorrow night. Right? That's a great example. Go through that flow, and what kind of things do you find that are out of place? When we think of accessibility, we like to categorize, and we say that there's 4 or 5 major types of disabilities. That we're talking about people with visual impairment and hearing impairment, mobility and dexterity impairment, and cognitive impairments. And even speech-related impairments. We like to categorize and put people in boxes, and it's really not that simple. And I really mean this. We like to put things in boxes all the time. As an example, these are my 2 sons, and I have put them in boxes many times because it's lots of fun. This is our first son. He's 18 months here, 18 months old. He's now 12. I tried to get him to come tonight because he's here in Chicago with me, and he's like, no. You're going to show that photo of me in a box again, aren't you? Yes, he's like, forget it, I'm not coming. And this is my other son, who's now 3, and of course, this first son loves this being in this box, so I'm going to put my other son in a box too and see how happy he is. Of course, he wasn't nearly as happy. But we like to put things in boxes, and we do that in the accessibility world all the time. The reality is that accessibility can be very, very messy. The real world, this is why this is in this field guide. We all want to believe that everybody stays up to date with their technology, including people with disabilities. These are quotes from actual studies that we did. I should probably upgrade JAWS, but I'm going to have to manually move all my settings and macros, and I just don't want to do it. Right? That's reality. This is a person that instead of being on JAWS 17, which is the latest and greatest, and this fall we'll probably see JAWS 18, this is a person that was on JAWS 13, which is from effectively 5 years ago. And we keep saying all these things like, I don't know if you guys know this, but we're nerds, and not the rest of the world. The rest of the world is not. And other people don't. It's not that they never do, but they're slower to upgrade. They might choose not to. They're not as technically inclined as we are. And this is
makes you pay for it too.
And Freedom Scientific, they make you pay. This is another one. What was this? I've been using I've been using Dragon 10 for a while now. It just works. Why would I spend the money when I don't have to? Right? We're about to hit Dragon 15 is coming out in September. Dragon 10 is from not quite 5 years ago, but pretty close. Why would I update? that starts to get messy, especially when people are saying things like, you know, we try to say, well, I want to be just on this browser, or we support these browsers, and what assistive technologies do we support, if we even have that conversation. Everybody wants to say, we even say, when we're doing a lot of testing, current version -2. Well, current version -2 wouldn't have caught either one of these different scenarios, and these were people that showed up in actual testing for us, and so it's kind of like, it's that reality check that not everybody is like us, even though we want to believe that everybody is. It just doesn't happen. How many people have never heard a screen reader at full pace before? Hands up and say aye. So some of you might not even know what a screen reader is, but a screen reader, basically somebody that is blind might use a screen reader to read the screen for them. And from a captioning perspective, this isn't going to work at all, because this is just a very fast video. But this is actual footage from a user test that we did, and this was how fast they have their screen reader going pretty much all the time. So here we go. Now, this is somebody that's going through the remote desktop software that we're using, and so they're looking for very specific pieces of information. Right? They're not sitting there listening to a web page that fast to get at that content. They might slow that down to go through a form, but they had a very specific task that they were trying to complete there, which was, let's log in and allow people to access the remote desktop. For that activity was completely fine, right? For them. Now, not everybody listens to it that fast, but that's an actual recording. Like, we didn't go in there and speed this up with the magic of computers or anything. That was actually how fast it was. How fast or how easy do you think it might be to miss something when things are going that fast? Like, you know, an error message comes up. And this is the thing that's bugging me a lot lately, actually, that my web pages are giving me alert notifications and I'm typing, and that notification suddenly takes the focus and I dismiss it because I was typing something and I don't even know what it said. Really easy to miss. I don't know if maybe that's just me, but that happens all the time. We dismiss notifications if we're in the middle of typing something. We don't know what it was, but we feel like, well, we've done our job. We gave them a notice, and they actually, so let's see what I'm going to do here. They didn't actually notice the notice. Is that just a bad joke? It's really easy to miss something when a screen reader is going that fast, and we would tend to say, well, that's their problem. But it actually, we have to kind of get past that and say, well, what can we do about that? Right? Are there things that we can actually change? When we talk about the real world of accessibility being messy, I love this example as well. Most people have talked about, and Aurelia, you can't answer this. You're not allowed to answer this. When we say something about like the autism spectrum, and people are talking about people not being, they're autistic or they're not autistic. We talk about the autism spectrum. Just kind of draw for me, in the sky here, draw for me what a spectrum looks like when you think about the autism spectrum. So I'm seeing some people doing this where they're putting their arms out wide. Some people are drawing a line. Some people, I don't know what this was. Somebody putting your hand up and down. I don't know what it actually is. We'll go with it. That's totally fine. And I saw one person do like a O and circly thing. I was like, there's almost some jazz hands happening. That's kind of where we're getting to. But this brilliant cartoon that a person that is autistic created to kind of express how she was feeling about things. I love this, and so she had this cartoon, and there's links to this out there, and I will tweet this at you so for the full version of the cartoon. But she says here in this cartoon, sometimes when people think of this word, they think of the autism spectrum as being like this, and it's that linear spectrum where on the left-hand side we've got not autistic, and on the right-hand side we've got very autistic. And we have this kind of mental model that some people that have autism fit somewhere on there. And then, you know, because we think that we can judge that kind of thing, we can see, I can look at somebody and say, oh, they have autism. And it's totally not like that. But because of this idea that somebody is either not autistic or very autistic or somewhere in between, and that constitutes a spectrum, she was finding that people were constantly pushing her into situations that she was completely uncomfortable with simply because she didn't look autistic. And so she created this to kind of talk about that. And I love this because her depiction in this next slide of what the spectrum actually means to her is brilliant. The truth is, though, someone who is neurodiverse in some areas of their brain will also be no different to your average person in other areas of their brain. And so she took this and literally made like a circular spectrum that still has all the colors of the rainbow in it, but to different kind of like different levels of saturation and different color values. And she says, so the autistic spectrum looks more like this, and she's got 5 aspects of kind of neurodiversity or brain function that she mapped onto this. There's many more than that, but she took these 5. Language skills, motor skills, perception, executive function, and sensory filter. So executive function is kind of that part of your brain that regulates, like, you shouldn't say that right now, right? Or you should say this right now. Or reading social situations, your brain, executive function is that part of your brain that kind of regulates all of that. And so she figures that this is where she is. Her language skills are very advanced, much better than average, but her sensory filter is much, much lower than average. Her executive function is roughly average. Her perception skills, much better than average, and her motor skills are much less than average. So for her, she's created this kind of profile of these 5 particular characteristics. They're not the 5 characteristics that we would map for somebody that has autism or everybody that has autism. They're just 5 that seem like really convenient ones that people could easily understand. And I love this model because it's really not about you're either this or that. It's complicated, it's messy, right? And I think of the same thing for vision. I have a friend with Stargardt syndrome, which means that he only has peripheral vision, right? He has no central vision, but he has some peripheral vision. So if you think of applying this kind of a spectrum type model to vision, you might think of peripheral vision as one of the characteristics, central vision as another characteristic, the ability to perceive color, the ability to have stereo vision, right? Some people can only see with one eye, therefore their depth, wow, I need glasses. And you're blurry right now. Hang on a second, switch. Maybe I need it for both eyes. But stereo vision, you need to be able to see with both eyes to be able to see 3 dimensions and to have that depth perception. So depth perception might be another factor that we take into account here. There's lots of different things that that might make up somebody's visual profile. So we can apply that to many different types of disabilities or characteristics. So things do continue to get messy. This is a little bit of a concept of the viewport, and I'll explain more what that means later. This kind of follows along with us putting people in boxes. The viewport is the part of your browser that shows the web page. And I'm going to share this with you. This is my father-in-law's desktop computer, a screenshot of his computer, and he passed away last summer. But when we were there, probably about 6 months to 9 months before he passed away, we were kind of looking at his computer, and I'm looking at it, and I see things on here that really scare me, and I don't really understand it. But I see here that he's got a new briefcase icon, and then he's got a copy of a new briefcase icon, and he's got a copy 2 of a new briefcase icon, and he's also got a shortcut to a new briefcase icon. He has all of these things on his desktop, and I'm like, dude, what's going on here? Like, I don't understand. And I'm looking at other things, and other things scare me. Like he's got 2 copies of Apache on his desktop. Don't understand why. Shortcut to games, a shortcut to C Haven, and then C Haven 2, and then C Haven 3. And I'm looking at this, and I'm trying to understand it. I don't get it. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment. Can you tell what resolution that screen is just by looking at it?
800 by 600.
800 by 600. Some people usually say like, oh, 640 by 480.
Yeah.
What size? Some of you don't even know what 640 by 480 is. That's totally good if you're actually in that place. What size monitor do you think it's on?
27 inch.
Who said that? Who said that? You've been in my presentation before. 27-inch monitor at 832 by 624. I don't know why 832 by 624, but that's, you know, like all of those icons.
You didn't want to go to 640.
Yeah. All of those icons, the multiple copies, I start to realize as I watch him working on the computer, not only does he have low vision and has this setting where he's at 832 by 624 on a 27-inch monitor, but he also has some dexterity issues because he's pushing 90. And when he tries to double click, when he's holding down the mouse, he tries to double click with his left finger, and invariably what happens is his middle finger ends up tapping on the right click button as well. So he's double clicking and dragging at the same time, like accidentally, just moving it like by 10 pixels. He's dragging and right clicking and letting go, and it's creating shortcuts and doing all this stuff. And so he's not just somebody that has low vision. He's not just somebody that has mobility and dexterity issues. He's got both of those things going on at the same time. He was also, and you can imagine how this would be, he was also deaf in his left ear. He didn't drive anymore, and his wife actually drove. So she was in the driver's seat, and she's deaf in her right ear.
Oh.
And he was in the passenger seat, and he was deaf in his left ear. And you can imagine what driving with them might have been like. They couldn't hear each other, and so they were like, you know, yelling, and it escalated, and wow. So, you know, we think about putting people in boxes, and we think about, oh, this person is blind, or this person has low vision, this person, I mean, it is so not that simple. People are going to have multiple things that are going to impact how they work on the computer in multiple ways. We cannot, and I'm going to get back to the viewport here, we cannot make assumptions about the device that somebody is on based on their viewport. Now, he was at 832 by 624. If we were creating a responsive design for him, what size or what version of the site would he probably get? He'd probably get the tablet type rendering, and he's not on a tablet. But we make assumptions all the time about the size of the viewport that somebody has and what device they're on. It is so not that simple. Right? Viewport is not a proxy for anything. All it tells you is what's the visible size of this window. Right? And things are changing, changing all the time. iOS 9, we now have on iPads and iPad Pros, we have our split screen capability. Right? Something goes into a half screen, we've got a browser on there, maybe that's now getting a mobile view, or that you can even split it like 2/3, 1/3, or 1/4, 3/4 on an iPad Pro. And so it's maybe not, it's a tablet, but maybe it's getting a mobile viewport in that docked kind of strip down the side. Viewport isn't a proxy for anything. We can't make assumptions about it. And that's becoming even more prevalent to us. We found this, we were doing a series of usability tests right before Christmas. And we found 3 out of 8 screen reader users. And I want you to think about this. 3 out of 8. That's close to 50%. 3 out of 8 screen reader users were on computers where they don't have a monitor attached. Right? We call it headless browsing. They are working in a scenario where they don't have anybody that they live with. They don't need a monitor, right? They're using JAWS or VoiceOver or whatever it is. They don't need a monitor. So they're browsing in a it just sounds weird every time I say it, they're browsing in kind of like a headless situation. Their screens look like this, and so this is our capture of the remote desktop. But one of the things that we find really interesting on Windows is when there's no monitor attached, instead of the screen being, because there's a virtual screen there, right? There's a virtual desktop, even though it's not being displayed on a monitor. Not landscape, but portrait, every time. That has some pretty significant impacts. This is a browser that is maximized on that portrait screen, and you can see this big honking sidebar on the left-hand side. It's their favorite sidebar that they didn't even know really was open, but the visible portion, they were in a tablet layout because of responsive design. Responsive design is fantastic, but we have to keep in mind that this responsive design or this tablet layout was actually something that somebody is now using their keyboard to go through. They're not necessarily on a tablet. We have to do kind of more testing. This is another one where you know, their browser was actually half the width of the screen. This is real. Like we didn't make this stuff up. This was real scenarios. The last one, we had to go in. This window was I think 150 pixels by 150 pixels. We had to go in and make it a little bigger so that we could actually, as we were doing the remote session, we actually had to go in and resize it so that we could even see what was going on and what they were interacting with. So this stuff is not like, you know, these assumptions that we make about Viewport, that somebody's on a mobile view and they're therefore using touch. It doesn't hold true. Right? We need to do more. We have to test our mobile and tablet layouts and those breakpoints with a keyboard. We have to. Disability is often a usability amplifier, and I'm a big believer that this happens both in a positive direction and in a negative direction. We have done lots of work with people with disabilities and people without, doing usability testing on the same product with the same user tasks, and we have found time and time again that people with disabilities find the same usability problems as people without disabilities, but they find them faster and they're much more pronounced. They're very much easier to see and to kind of isolate in the interface than they would be for somebody that doesn't have a disability. Somebody that doesn't have a disability might just brush something off, and even though it slows them down by 2 seconds, they kind of move on. Somebody with a disability, that 2-second roadblock might actually become a 2-minute roadblock or a 10-minute roadblock. Really depends on what it is. We also see that making things better for someone with a disability improves it for everyone, but maybe not to the same extent. So if I make a usability enhancement for me, and it might help me get through something twice as fast, that same enhancement might help somebody that has a disability get through it 10 times as fast. So we look at this and we see that disability is often a usability amplifier. Tell us this all the time. All this stuff that you've taught us, yes, it makes it more accessible, but really fundamentally, this is just a better design, period. And I'm a big believer in this, that if we create things that work better for kind of these extreme levels of ability, we're making things better for everyone. You may have seen this stuff. This is what is this? It's part of like Fast Company, the magazine. This is a design-related publication. And this is from February 2006, Microsoft's radical bet on a new type of design thinking. And Microsoft is doing this, Google is doing this, everybody is doing the things that we have all been saying for like 10, 15 years now. They're doing it and making a huge splash with it. Does anybody here work at either Microsoft or Google? Okay, good. So I'm not, okay, cool. But this was a big article about this radical new way of thinking. And Google is like, how designing for disabled people is giving Google an edge. People are like, the big companies are waking up to this now, right? This was in May of 2016. There's a lot of people that have been talking about this since like January 2001, This has been going on for an awfully long time, and now people are kind of waking up to it. It's actually kind of fantastic, or at the same time. I wish we had gotten to this point much, much sooner. But the fact that Google's talking about this and Microsoft is, that's a big boon for us. I'm going to do a couple more examples, and then we'll talk about some other things here. When we talk about designing for these extremes, I want you to think of this. This is an example that I use very often. And what we did with the straw test is to limit our view of the screen. So that's really a kind of an extreme that we're expressing onto that design. They're a pain. And if you were to try and work with this data table in a magnified scenario, right, because you had low vision, you might be faced with something like this. And your ability to understand the entire scope of the table is kind of severely hampered by the fact that you have that limited view of the screen. There's visual relationships that are created in data tables that has low vision maybe isn't going to see. But we can code this table of data so that it works reasonably well for a screen reader user. But for someone with low vision, this might be really difficult. So we're zoomed in at this level, it's maybe 400%. And I'm on this table cell here where it has the number 10 in it. But it's a lot of work for me as a magnifier user to figure out what it's about, and then to come back down, and then to go over to the left to figure out what those two pieces of data were. Whereas when I can see the entire thing, I can see here that this number 10 is Jupiter, and its hours are in a day for that planet. And I can see that readily because I can see the whole table. But if I can't see that whole table, it becomes really much more difficult to do any comparison or data mining or whatever it is. So we started playing around with ideas like this. And that is some functionality so that when you're magnified, you can actually pull those row and column headers in so that you can actually get that context. So I'll zoom it back out so you can see this. Here's the entire table. And as I click on a particular cell, or sorry, hover over a cell, we get this little call to action to bring the row and the column headers in so that somebody that is magnified or has that limited view of the screen, we pull those things in. It's some simple CSS and some simple JavaScript. And I swear to you, as I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing people nodding like, oh, almost everybody that I show this to says, I want that. And I can see the screen just fine. Because we get stuck with dealing with tables like this that are pages and pages and pages long. I mean, that's just poor design for everybody. But the impact of that poor design announced on people with different types of disabilities. So, what would this actually look like, or how would that work here? That might actually be even more important. I mean, if we can, we'd always love to break up these big, massive, long tables into smaller chunks, right, into smaller tables if we can. But we can't always do that. So why don't we have a set of tools that allow us to do this? If you want to see an example of it, examples.simplyaccessible.com/cell-headers. You're going to go there. There's some variations on it as well that we've created that are slightly different. So we have a version where you could actually click, and instead of bringing in one row header, that you could actually bring in that entire column to bring that over, or bring in that entire header row, so that if you were magnified, you have the ability to kind of traverse a row or a column much easier and do. Now, this was something that we kind of conceptualized and prototyped and put together pretty quickly. It's not something that I would say, go out and take that code and put it on your tables and you're done. You would need to do work to do this, but almost everybody that I show this to says like that, because we deal with tons of financial data, right? Or we deal with annual reports, and we want to have that ability to do stuff like this. So this is the kind of thing that you can do when you start really think about what it means to have kind of a limited view of the screen and what impact that has on people with low vision. I'm going to share one more with you here, and this is a story about my dad. I want people to design for extreme emotions as well. Several years ago, my parents. This is like a complicated story, so I'll tell it in as straightforward a way as I can. So my father is like, he's now, I don't even remember how old he is. He's older than I am. So, but this is him and me together, and he's the one with the sideburns, and you can tell it's the 70s because of this in the corner with that weird pattern and the spiral around the central pole. I don't even know. People would pay thousands of dollars for a lamp like that now, and they would call it retro. And I wish we still had it, but you know, my dad was like a big burly dude, and there's a lot of things that have happened over time, and he's older, and he's had a lot of things that have happened. He had prostate cancer, and so he had a lot of treatments. He had hormone treatment, and he said, like he's told me before, like I'm very emotional about stuff now that he didn't used to, or he was like, this is maybe a little bit stereotypical, but he was my dad, and he was like brought up in that age where like boys don't cry, right? And so he's my dad, so of course he doesn't cry, but he cries. Emotionally, he was being set off by certain things. He actually was at the point where he was in a very, very extreme emotional state because he was away on a cruise with my mom, and I had to call them because his mom, my grandmother, had just passed away. I was trying to get them to book tickets to come back because they needed to fly back off the cruise, and he was like, you know, and he was ready to book the tickets. I ended up doing it with his credit card because he didn't want to do it. And I started to try and unpack why. And I said, you know, you guys should sign up. So we're Canadian, so Air Canada is like our main airline. We have two airlines. That sounds like we're really small, but Air Canada and WestJet are kind of our two national level airlines that fly pretty much everywhere in the country. And, you know, let's sign you up for Aeroplan, which is our frequent flyer program for Air Canada. And he didn't want to do it. He's like, I don't want to do it. I'm digging into why. Story about how he bought an MP3 player. I won't say who it was from, but and he went to register it online, to register for the warranty. My dad is the one of about 3 people in the world that actually go online and register warranties for things. So he did that, and he was telling me about this form that he tried to fill in warranty. He said, I got through it all, and I put all the information in that I thought was right, and I thought everything was good, and I hit the submit button on it, and it came back, and it was basically a sea of red. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said there was errors everywhere, and I froze. I didn't know what to do anymore. And I said, well, what would have made it better? And he said, well, I really felt like if they knew all of these errors were there, why didn't they tell me before I submitted the form, but my dad would never say that. Before I hit the button on the form, why didn't they tell me about the before? Like now it's overwhelming. He said it was too much. And he lost every bit of confidence that he had after this transaction. He wouldn't go back, and he wouldn't book those flights himself. He wouldn't sign up for Aeroplan, the loyalty program, himself. He said when he did this, getting through these error messages, he felt like an idiot. Like he's like, this is not a valid email format, right? These are the error messages. This is how he's seeing them. Password doesn't contain a special character. Neither does this one. Sigh. How can you not know your name? Like, this is how he's feeling. He's telling me about this. This date isn't formatted correctly. Come on. And get this right. Yep, I was right. Seriously, are you stupid? I can't wait for this to end. You're really not that smart. Odds are pretty slim on this one. Why do you use computers? This is what he was feeling. Not in quite those words, but that's what he was feeling the web page was doing to him. I cry. And web pages made my dad cry. They make you cry probably for different reasons. But they make him cry too. And I was like totally shocked about this. And he is tentative to fix this 2 hours before he actually successfully got the form to go. Because he was overthinking it now. By this point, he's like, oh man, error message, fix that, error message. He just couldn't get it done. Dad was like, my dad was a auto mechanic. Right? He didn't use computers. He's a mechanic. And now that he's retired, time. And we kind of forget that. There's a lot of new people out there. So I want us to kind of think about all of these things. I want us to think about the extremes that people have to deal with. They're all scenarios. Everything that I've shared here today is a scenario that you would kind of question it and say, oh, that can't possibly have happened. Like, oh, that's like a 1 in whatever chance, right? Yeah, maybe my dad is an edge case, right? Maybe your dad or your mom's an edge case too. The problem is, and I like kind of thinking about it this way, we say a lot of things in life, and I know as a teacher I've said this, helped just one person, right? We're all excited and we give that so much weight. If I can have helped just one person and made a difference, then we're really ecstatic about that. And then when we think about that we actually created a barrier for, we don't give it nearly that much weight. But we're like doing the opposite. We're like, oh, it's just one person. So that's really, really something that we've kind of, all of these different scenarios, these things that seem like edge cases, they're actually, in many ways, the norm. People out there that we're designing for and building for are so not like us. They really aren't. We need to really keep that in mind. And the whole is that accessibility really is messy. These are things that you'll never see this stuff in a guideline, encapsulated all in a guideline. Do this, do this, do this. It's real world, and it's much more messy than that. I want you to be thinking about these things, like putting these extremes onto design problems and then solving them. What I want you to, a lot of people that are new to accessibility go into it and they say things like this: there's only so much I can do. To scratch out the only word and just go with there's so much I can do. There's so many little things that you can do that make a huge difference to people with disabilities and how they use the web. I would love it if you would just go for it. I know some of you are doing this already, but I want you to think about some of the things that we've talked about here as challenges that maybe you haven't thought about before, things that you want to investigate more. How can you bring some of these things into your work? Doing the straw test on your wireframes and on your mock-ups to look for those opportunities. Out there, and I want you to think about all of them. I know I have successfully almost spoken until exactly 7:30, which means I don't have to answer any questions at all, which is totally good. I am happy to kind of have really minimal discussion. Keep your questions to 2 words or less. But I'd love to talk, and I know, how long are we here? How long do you have the space?
We have it till 8, but
Give or take.
give or take.
8:03 if we needed to.
We'll go for it.
If you guys want to ask questions, I'm happy to do that. We can do that kind of in this forum, or we can kind of mill about as well. So I'm happy to take a few questions now, and then we can just kind of hang. So if there are questions, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, First of all, thank you. This is all very. I hear a lot of what you're saying, having done adaptive tech work at the help desk, where I had somebody once. I said, "Push the Windows key," and she said, "What's that?" You do have the extremes out there. I wanted to ask you. I do QA testing, so my main focus is screen reader.
Yeah.
Things that I can do to maybe try to hit a few of these extremes a little bit more carefully than I do. You know, things that I should be listening for. And it's really tough to try to cover all the bases. I'd sure like to be able to cover more.
It is. I know one of the things that, do you use an iPad by any chance at all?
I do, yes.
One of the things that I love about the iPad and a touchscreen, like an iOS touchscreen device, by touch. So even yourself, even though you're completely blind, you could explore by touch over the entire interface. But dragging your finger around, I don't know if you use Explore by touch very much, but it can very easily show you some of these layout problems. And one of the layout problems that we often see low vision, I would look for very, very clearly, and change that. I would listen for on VoiceOver forms or content that appears to be in multiple columns. Multiple columns for someone with low vision can be a huge deal. The form button, you know, we see form buttons all the time that are kind of down in the bottom left corner or the bottom right corner of an interface, and they're like always in the bottom right corner, which seems really predictable and stuff. But for someone that has low vision, if there's like massive amounts of white space there, that button that's in the bottom right corner might not even be noticeable. You can, you know, it's obviously there's a lot more exploration that you can do there, or that you would need to do. One of the things that a huge issue is like mismatched alt text. And when the alt text on an image says one thing, but the actual text that's visible on it says another thing, issues for people that use Dragon Naturally Speaking. Now, not that they can't get around it, but if this, let me see what I'm trying to find an interface. 1 second.
That one I have caught.
Good. Mismatched alt text can be really difficult. If I put up, I'll show this desktop again. Pretend this desktop is a web page. It's not. It's just it's a desktop. But this is a link to Apache. Okay. Just assume for a second that this was an image, and the image says Apache on it. Underneath the hood, the alt text was OpenOffice. Right? If I'm looking at that screen and I'm using voice recognition software, I'm going to say, click Apache. And if the alt text underneath says OpenOffice, right, that mismatched alt text is actually, everybody thinks about alt text as being like, this is critical for people with visual impairment. Just as critical for people that use Dragon Naturally Speaking, particularly when things are images that are active. Actually, if you're already catching that, that's a huge boon. The last one that I'll give you is, and you've probably come across this as a screen reader user, things that look clickable but aren't actually clickable.
Oh God!
You can't tab to it, or it's clickable but it's a clickable div. It's not a button or a link. For someone that's using Dragon Naturally Speaking, like there's ways around it, but that really slows them down to click on these things that aren't natively focusable or clickable. So finding those, know that you're actually not just finding them for yourself, but you're finding them for every Dragon user out there as well. I'd love to talk with you more about that stuff too, because I'd love to put some more thought into other things that you could find pretty readily. So let's talk more about that. What was your name?
Ray Campbell.
Ray
I'm
Campbell.
QA with United Airlines. I work with Dennis.
Oh, okay, cool.
Don't hold that against you.
I wouldn't think of it. I wouldn't think of it. Question in the back.
What are the text-to-speech or speech-to-text within Dragon is something I've heard from a couple people that are focusing on different aspects of accessibility, and they find that to be the most challenging right out? What are some resources to try and learn more about that particular aspect?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, you've heard about Dragon Naturally Speaking, and to kind of focus on that a little bit more. There's not a lot of info out there. What kind of resources are there? Was that a good paraphrasing?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. There's not a lot of great resources out there, but what I would recommend you do if you really want to learn about Dragon, right now it's $100. It yourself. It is a piece of assistive technology that I would recommend you go and try it out and learn about it, read through the documentation, learn how it works. We write articles about it on our site, simpleaccessible.com. So we don't just write about Dragon, but we write about kind of pan disability as we can and cover as many different types of disabilities. And there's lots of videos out there speaking at conferences and meetups like this where I'm doing demos of Dragon and stuff like that. So you can certainly learn things there. The best part about building things that work for almost any assistive technology is make it simple. Use buttons, use links, use straight up great quality HTML, and you make the things that you're building work very well, very easily with a lot of different assistive technologies. It's not as simple as that, but in many ways it is as simple as that. So, the clickable div, that doesn't work for anybody really that's trying to use the keyboard. The links makes things it makes things hum. So think about that kind of stuff as you're doing it, because a lot of simple things that you can do that you don't even really have to research. It's not like a quirk of Dragon or anything like that. It's more, if we build it this way, it's going to be usable by the widest variety of people possible, kind of thing. Helps. If you have other questions, though, feel free to get in touch. Well, I'll put this up here too. Hang on 1 second before we finish. Just so that you can get in touch as well. If you want to connect on Twitter, I'm Feather on Twitter. If you want to email, not me, because sometimes my inbox is a black hole because of reasons. And so hello at Simple is a great way to kind of get in touch and ask questions. We often use the questions that come in as prompts to write an article about X. So if you have questions, we'd love for you to ask them, and we quite often write about it. So another question in the back.
A lot of clients today are struggling trying to become responsive, update and modernize their website. Some of the barriers that I've come across from UX perspective, they just don't want to go that extra step. The one argument I say, well, if you make your site accessible, yes, it improves user experience, but more importantly, like Google, help your page rank. So that's just an example. What are things you can say to help massage these sort of that they just don't want to go forward? They're already struggling with trying to get rid of legacy systems, trying to get into being responsive. And
yeah.
It's so overwhelming for the business to understand that just going that extra inch means so much.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to that, because I was just going to ask a similar question. When you have a client focus that's essentially millennial and of a certain generation, clearly they're really not focused on this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Exactly what she said right there. What can you say that make them take that extra step?
So
beyond that, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
You can try to say, hey, the baby boomers,
Yeah.
the point that a lot of these people are not familiar with this technology. We're literally dealing with the issue of adoption and acceptance, how it's a part of the daily routines. It doesn't resonate.
So to bring it together, ultimately the question for both of you is, how do you get people to go the extra inch or the extra mile or whatever it is? Make it not anything extra, right? Like our focus entirely is we make it in so that it's not seen as an optional thing. It's not like this thing that can be left aside, and if we get to it, if we have time, great, because guess what? As soon as it becomes a thing where if we get time to do it, we'll do it. There's never time to do it, right? if it's not baked in, you're kind of like, we spend half of our time, or at least half of our time, not just helping teams fix things that are like websites. We actually spend a good chunk of our time, maybe 3/4, helping people fix their process, their systems, and the way that they work, and their mindsets, so that it's never ever seen as an extra thing. It's actually just the way that we do it. Kind of totally avoiding the question, but it's a big part of it is mindset. It's not an extra thing. It's actually part of it. And we know lots of millennials have disabilities. Loads of them. I don't know if you guys saw this. There's an article that came out not too long ago that younger generation in China right now, 75% of males between the ages of 18 and 25, 75%. It's always been kind of like roughly 1/3 of people. If you look at this room, and we're probably as geeky nerds that look at screens all day, we're probably slightly higher than, say, 1/3 of people that need some kind of corrective eyewear. But in China right now, and I think it was 18 to 25, it could be a different, but 75% or more need glasses right now. So things are changing, right? So I think there's things that we can point to that say, for yourself now, but do it for your future self as well. Elle, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Elle. I work with Derek. And the one one thing I was going to add to what Derek said, and I think that it's something to consider. Accessibility appears daunting, and it appears like a huge amount of work, and you don't understand what you have to do. So it's supported because the processes are aware of what needs to happen. Education is everything, because the reason why it's easy for us to build accessibility into our process and into what we do every day, and why it's not that extra effort, is because we understand what we're doing. So the real challenge is not making a business case for someone who is anxious and doesn't understand what it is that you're asking. Sounds they don't understand what that means for their daily work, right? The real challenge is to inspire people to want to be educated. An easier mountain to climb, because people like when they're good at their jobs, they like improving their skills. And anything that you look at today with responsive, with mobile first, anything that's web or UX best practices, all of that, they've been doing accessibility all along without knowing, right? So if you link those together and they understand excellence for user experience, and that the real challenge is to encourage people to be educated, the business case makes sense. That's my experience. I'm going to share that.
So just to summarize that, a huge part of this is education, right? It has to be part of everything, and that's when you know what you're doing, it doesn't seem like a mountain. It seems like much smaller chunks of work that need to get done. Part of it is part and parcel. It won't surprise you that part of the reason that I'm here teaching and sharing these things with you is because it helps bring the level up for everybody. I used to be a high school teacher, and it's a big part of what I do, and it's a big part of what our mission is. We want this internally. Our mission is to go and make more believers. That this is important, that this matters. Internally, you don't get to work with us if you're not somebody that believes that this is some of the most important work that anybody gets to do. And so our mission is to actually go out there and make more believers out of more people. Like, literally, that's it. If we can do that, we know we're succeeding, because with that education level rises, stuff anymore. It's like this, no, we know how to do this. We can do this. All the teams that we work with, large and small, they get to a point where when they're working with us, it starts to click. It makes sense. And it becomes the way that they do things. When they've been doing it for long enough, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, they don't need that checklist anymore. List at the beginning, because they don't know where to start. that disappears and it goes away because you build it into your practice. You build things like pattern libraries that have accessibility built in. Guides that have color palettes that are pre-vetted for color contrast so that you have color combinations that work. You know, you don't have to test them out until the next time you rebrand. So that education is critical. And I mentioned this, I would be absolutely silly to not do this with such a captive audience here. If you're interested in the kinds of things that we do, and Dennis actually reminded me to do this beforehand, hiring, we need people. SA teaches / jobs. SA teach, SATEACH.ES / jobs. We're hiring testers.
I don't want to move to
consultants.
Canada.
Here's the cool thing. We have a US company too.
Team USA.
Chicago.
Yeah, how about Chicago?
Chicago, Patrick works for us and he's here in Chicago. Elle works for us and she's in Louisville, Kentucky. We have people in Vancouver, Nova Scotia, the Philippines, Australia, the UK, Ottawa, Nova Scotia, what am I missing? Portland, Seattle. Hawaii. Hawaii, how cool is that?
Hey, there we go.
People work for us, the entire team is remote. If you want to talk about all that kind of stuff too, we can talk about it afterwards. Elle, is this a comment or a question? Okay.
Just because I want to be a prompter.
Oh boy.
Can you tell the story about the quote that you put up earlier about all these things with accessibility, but this is just good design?
Yeah.
Special quote very close to my heart. This location, so I wanted to talk a little bit about where that happened.
Yeah, this quote, all this stuff that you've taught us, yes, it makes this more accessible, but really fundamentally, this is just a better design, period. So 4 years ago, Office, we were doing training, some workshops for critical mass designers and developers and like product management types. And they were working with us as partners for Humana. So we were working for Humana. Do you want to tell this part of the story? Elle used to work for Humana. She ran the accessibility program at Humana. And Critical Mass was hired as part of the team to do this big redesign. We were Simply Accessible was hired as part of the team to be, and this happened at Critical Mass, like lead designer, after a full day workshop with us, after looking at all these examples, she actually came up with this and she said, all this stuff you taught us, yes, you made it more accessible, but you've just made this stuff better designed, period. And that was like this moment where teacher, I was like, oh my God, they got it. You know, like there's like mission accomplished, because that's exactly, I believe in, it's what we've seen time and time again. So this is pretty kind of fun to be able to be here and talk about it, because it happened right here.
I'll give you another one that's about as good. I think it's as good as that too, and that is education we do, the more likely we'll put people like you out of business, because everybody will get it.
Yeah, the more, and you know, I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
But we actually say this, you know, a little insight into work. We actually say with every client, our goal is that by the end of it, you don't need us anymore. Right? I mean, you still want us and want to work with us because we're fun to work with and stuff. But if things go well, you shouldn't need us anymore. We're good with that.
The reason I asked you that, besides giving a shout out to Dr. Mass, I love that experience, but also because you meet anybody who wants to come to Mass project, it was such a magical time because of the fact that they, as UX professionals, were allowed to put the user first above everything else, because accessibility was a fundamental requirement. So for those of you who are UX professionals, opportunity to have the sky's the limit for the best possible user experience when you make accessibility a requirement. They felt empowered and not hampered by that. They felt totally empowered and really just ignited because of the idea that stop every single thing, no stone left unturned to really explore about how to make the best user experience. So
I'll summarize that again just for the captioning. It was a magical time, definitely, and for the UX team to feel like it was something that it spurned and created a need for innovation, and it wasn't something that was hampering people. It was like, we can do better, we can do this, and it sparked a lot of creativity in the solutions that we created. And so it was a special time. We did absolutely put the user first as a fundamental requirement. It was a requirement, and not just because L said so. It was a requirement because there's like regulations that say what we did. I kind of get a little goosebumpy thinking about it, because L straight up said, we're putting together this team, and it was exactly that, a team that said, good enough isn't, period. And it was awesome. It was awesome. It was pretty amazing. And now she works with us. Yeah.
There are some requirements coming up in the United States, actually.
If DOJ ever gets off their butts and releases
Well, late, I hope he's targeting advocacy that this really works within the disability space. Would tell you that the American Disabilities Act has always, and the Department of Justice has said, it's always intended to account for people with disabilities on the web. What it isn't yet is explicitly stated. But every lawsuit that has ever, gone through the courts in the United States points directly to the American Disabilities Act. And so it's arguably something that you don't even have to wait for.
No, you don't.
Anybody else to be able to make that clear, because advocates and people with disabilities require, access to the web and an equal, experience the same as anyone else has. Now everything has moved that direction.
I thought I read an article where financial institutions, healthcare, nonprofits, pretty soon, in a few years. I remember, I figured you guys would know.
Well, I work with the American Council. We have been a strong advocate for the rules, and what we've been told, and I have mixed feelings about this. Like Elle said, they're litigating basically what they're doing, and getting through litigation, you have things like Target, you have things like other places that have to make their sites accessible. The problem with litigation, you're always taking a chance what that court is going to say. And I think it'd just be much better for everybody if we just get the darn rules released.
There are different industries that are being covered by different things.
Right.
Like there's the meaningful access law that came out recently, which is really almost like a restating of Section 508 and Green Text. I'll point back to basic best practices like web content accessibility guidelines and usability testing. Airlines have recently gone through a change where their access requirements are no longer just to their websites. That they've been under 2 years of mad, tireless work. Almost every airline that you can think of right now has really been struggling to try and meet those requirements. So if it's not explicitly stated, it's covered under the APA. If it's not explicitly stated now, it probably will.
And it doesn't protect you from lots of
And why should we have to wait for the government to tell us? Let's just do it. Yes.
I'm just typing all of this up so that I can share it. There. I just summarize that in text. So that, what's your name? So I just summarize that in text so that, because the conversation at the back doesn't come through for the live captioning. So that's why I was summarizing a bunch of things, but then I got tired of talking, so I just typed it instead. So, cool. Any other questions? Or do you guys just want to have some bourbon? Or? There's bourbon or take. Like, I'm not going to force anybody, but we're here for a little bit longer. I'm happy to just kind of go around and chat. We'd love to talk with you. Thank you so much for being here.